Since I've been publishing videos about Civ 7 on this channel, one of the pervasive sentiments around the Civ community seems to be that the current backlash revolving around Civ 7 is a completely common and expected reaction based on the Civ cycle. That new Civ games launch as incomplete versions of themselves and do not contain the features of the preceding version that make them more complete and fun to play with all of their DLCs included. Way back in October of last year, I published a video of my thoughts on Civ evens versus Civ odds. It was divisive and remains the one video dragging down my likes versus dislikes average. More than a few fans of Civ V in particular voiced their displeasure. Anyway, folks who have watched more than a few of my videos will surely note that I have not had the most positive of things to say about Civ 7 since it launched. The game has been out now for 6 months or so and received numerous patches aimed at fixing bugs, cleaning up the game's UI, and addressing players' dissatisfaction regarding some of the game's core mechanics. I've yet to see any of the patching bear real fruit in making the game feel as fun and engrossing as any of its predecessors. Still, the myth persists that this is a normal part of the cycle and Civ 7 will eventually emerge as the preferred game in the series. I have voiced my skepticism in more than a few videos, and I remain afraid of the Civilization franchise's current trajectory. But I also wanted to put the Civ cycle to the test, because I maintain that it's bullshit and that lovers of Civs 1 to 4 have never moved on, lovers of Civ 5 have never moved on, just as much as lovers of Civ 6 are finding it difficult to move on. So I decided to load up a game using the original rule set to see how the OG Civ 6 from 2016 would make me feel today. For this game, by random Civ selection, I got Kublai Khan of China. So already of note, because Kublai Khan was a leader added as a DLC only with the New Frontier Pass, that although I am playing with the old rule set, all of the leaders from the DLCs were included in this playthrough. It's important to note that there were 19 civs available at launch, and leader traits and bonuses did change with patches and DLCs, so it's a bit tricky to go all the way back. But there were some significant things to pay attention to while I played, and I'll try to hit on some of them as I go through. But what I was really interested in knowing was whether or not playing Civ 6 with the original rule set would make it feel incomplete or not as fun to play as its fully expanded version. In short, no. OG Civ 6 is not as fun or engrossing as its fully expanded version. But let's take a deeper look. Horses are visible from turn 1. I was lucky enough to open a goodie hut and get a relic, as well as spawning close to a natural wonder. This was a pretty sweet start. But right away I noticed that there was no era score, no golden or dark ages, Eurekas and inspirations would still be important, but no era checklists and no need to worry about loyalty mechanics. I got an early pantheon and religious settlements was available, but oh my, it was not what I expected. So I chose Divine Spark, which I find is always a solid choice. Barbarians were as aggressive as ever. Horses and strategic resources don't stockpile. Instead, having a single improved resource of that type allows you to build units that require said resource, assuming you have unlocked the technology to build them. Different. Better or worse? I mean, different. I was alone on this island, just me and Kumasi, which normally would suck for me. It's just not how I like to play my Civ games. But my heart wasn't fully invested in this one. Plus I had an early relic, a nearby natural wonder, and a sick holy site, so I figured, why not? I ran holy site prayers once and then just ponied up the faith to recruit a great prophet, since I was probably going to strive for a religious game in this one. I recently found this mod that has historical religions and it expands the number of available religious names and icons. Anyway, it's almost totally a cosmetic thing that doesn't affect the gameplay, so I figured why not? I think it's called Tomatek's Historical Religions. Religious beliefs are a bit different under the old rule set, but work ethic is still there, though different, so I chose it. Holy Order is another of my go-tos, and it was still there, so I chose it as well. The game does let you know if you've crossed into a new era, coinciding with the first discovery of a subsequent era technology. This notification relates to you, not your adversaries. Being stranded alone on this tiny island really slowed my path to political philosophy, which sucks hard, but I got there. In 780 AD, I met Yerevan, which really changed my approach since I was striking upon a religious path up to this point anyway. Fans of the channel will know that I find Yerevan to be one of the most powerful city-states in the game. And since their suzerain bonus never changed throughout the DLCs, I still felt they would be strong given my outlook for this game. So I immediately became their suzerain. Indonesia would challenge this, but this is where my energies would be fixed for the game. Peace, faith generation, suzerainty of Yerevan, debaters, and hopefully a path to religious victory. Russia seemed to also be playing a faith game, though they either had no contact with or seemed disinterested in wresting Yerevan from my grip. Still, they mounted a significant challenge to my pursuit of a religious victory. When I saw them making headway against my army of apostles, I decided it was time to become suzerain of Yerevan for good. It was at about this point that we began to assert our religious dominance over other civilizations. Despite my religious invasions to the east and west, both Russia and the Maya, having launched inquisitions of their own, both mounted a significant resistance. Eager not to go to war, keeping my civilization small and tight, my faith generation could only grow so much. But by 1705, my religious campaign was gaining momentum and I had converted a majority of cities and a majority of civilizations. 70 years later, only Indonesia retained its own religion, but our religious invasion had already begun. All other civilizations had converted to my religion with only Macedon as undecided. We were close to victory. Though we were close at the end of 1785, we were defeated by Babylon, who completed their Mars colony. So, Babylon, yeah. Well, with this rule set, there were no future techs. The future techs have no eurekas, so a civ like Babylon, who take a science penalty that slows their progress significantly late in the game, was unaffected by their penalty under this rule set. The eurekas to space progress were unimpeded, and looking at it objectively, it's unsurprising that they emerged the victor, which would have been unlikely under the Gathering Storm rule set. Normally, I don't play with Babylon in the game. They are fun to play as one time, or if you really want to max out a speedrun, but they're a pretty broken civ that's not all that fun to play against. Because I was playing with the old rule set, well, I forgot to load up my usual leader pools and, oh well, quite literally the one civ not built with the old rules in mind at all. So, obviously, with opponents in the game like Macedon, Indonesia, Byzantium, Babylon, and the Maya, who weren't available during the original launch, it wasn't possible to play this game exactly like it would have been when it launched in October of 2016. We are almost 10 years removed from that time, so I can't say with absolute certainty exactly how close I got to the original experience. For example, all of the intermediate units like trebuchets, men-at-arms, line infantry, and pike and shots were available in this game and weren't in the original, not like I bothered to use any of them anyway. It's the same for natural wonders, some of which would have been available for this playthrough that weren't available when the game launched. Still, there were a lot of changes. For example, all of the city-states offered their original bonuses. I didn't pay too close attention to whether or not any city-states showed up that weren't in the original version of the game or that eventually morphed into other city-states. As I pointed out before, the pantheons and the religious beliefs had a different character to them. The policy cards were the original versions. There were warmonger penalties instead of grievances, and there was no diplomatic favor, world congress, or diplomatic victory points. I did also notice that wonders and entertainment districts only offered standard adjacency bonuses to theater squares instead of major adjacency bonuses. No rock bands either. After playing a whole lot of hours with a certain set of rules, changing over to this new set did throw me off a bit and tampered with some of the strategies I've grown accustomed to using, but nothing was so strange that I couldn't adapt. This was a really fast game that I played in just a few hours, on standard speed no less. I played a very one-dimensional game, unlike I'm used to playing. It's hard to say if games under the standard rule set were quicker, or if the game going so quickly had something to do with the way I played it. I wasn't totally invested like I get with most games and was really trying to see what playing in Once Upon a Time mode really felt like. As I've said, I have all of the content and just going back to the old rule set isn't quite enough to completely capture the feeling of the game as it would have been when it first launched. It's a bit like trying to go back and watch the original Star Wars. It's been hacked at so much that getting an original print seems almost impossible, and you're going to end up watching a version with a special edition fingerprint on it somewhere. But I remember playing Civ 6 for the first time, now almost 10 years ago, and I remember loving it, which is why I have often said that the Civ cycle is just a myth. After playing with the old rules, you know what? I still feel that way. Damn it, Civ 6 is awesome. When I first started playing and I was stuck on my own island, despite the goodies I got at the start, I felt a bit bummed. I even put the game down for a couple of hours, but I figured I'd play it through anyway. When I found Yerevan, I got totally hooked. I was like, okay, game on. As far as the differences go, they are not striking at all. I didn't miss the World Congress. I didn't miss the loyalty mechanic. I didn't miss the environment mechanic. I didn't miss not having Era score. I didn't miss anything. I never felt like, oh, why isn't that in there? All of the changes that were made in the DLCs were things that either tweaked things just slightly, like Era score giving more incentive to driving certain aspects of gameplay like building unique units and buildings, which I didn't bother to build in this game, building pimp districts or sailing around the world, or they added a ton of depth like Ages, Loyalty, and the World Congress. In no way did they make a bad game good. The bones of Civ 6 are great. The game looks great and information is easy to read, the pacing is close to flawless, and the fun factor is off the charts. I maintain that a game of OG Civ 6 is vastly superior to the current state of Civ 7 even after a bunch of patches and some DLC. In fact, you know what? I think I actually found playing with the old Civ 6 rules to be a little bit more challenging. Adding DLC sometimes dilutes the challenge. All of those extra mechanics serve as ways for the human player to drive their playstyle a little harder, and those weren't available to me here. There were less ways for me to unsettle the AI's plans and serve my own. The AI, in this case Russia, the Maya, and Indonesia, all mounted a competent response to my religious threat. And I will maintain, and I know some folks out there are going to call me crazy, that religious combat is in some ways much trickier than sticks and stones combat. But that's a video for another time. Anyway, given the added challenge, I'm not all that surprised that I lost. And that's another thing that OG Civ 6 really had going for it, perhaps even more so than Civ 6 with all of its DLCs. It was a real challenge. So, are you a longtime Civ 6 with all the DLCs player? If so, when was the last time you played with the old rule set? Does my argument support the idea that the Civ cycle is just nonsense and nothing more than an internet meme? Or am I just an old codger who's off his rocker? If you think it's the former, then let me know in the comments below. If it's the latter, then...
Shut up.
Dead?
Oh, would you shut up? I can't believe you don't shut up.